is there much point to Microsoft porting the Xbox OS or something like it to the PC space? Mainly thinking in terms of their repositioning of Xbox as a platform, not a machine. Would the resources gained in using an OS with less overhead than Windows not translate to much more performance in games? This one from, yes, the Bruce Dickinson. Find that kind of hard to believe, but we'll see. Hey DFT, please help me make sense of the Xbox PC hybrid rumors. Can you give me one reason why this makes any good sense at all? Console players don't want a PC. PC players don't want a console. No one wants to use productivity apps on a console. Steam makes its money from 30% rip-offs its storefront. There is no way they or any other storefronts are going to share these with Microsoft. So all Microsoft is left with is a half-baked console that is not able to recoup its retail loss via a dedicated storefront. Yeah, okay. John, this seems to be like two questions which are addressing the concept of Microsoft looking at gaming as something that can straddle both the console and PC space. Do you think that there is any merit to these questions? I mean, yes, the Bruce Dickinson seems to think that we're talking about an Xbox becoming a PC, but some might say it already is a PC. Whereas Johnny underscore 5A is saying, is there actually anything to gain by porting Xbox OS to PC? Thoughts?
I don't think there's anything to gain from doing that, I would start with. But I think that, well, the specific OS as it exists now, but I think for the second part, the idea I could see them going for is essentially they want to continue to have dedicated hardware that pushes things like Game Pass and their own stores as well. Sounds like the concept is simply that it's a little more open-ended than we typically see from consoles.
Yeah.
That you would still be able to access more Windows functions. But I would assume that, like a Steam Deck, it would still have a proprietary front end that would connect directly into all the Microsoft services. And I'm sure, however you feel about it, I'm sure Microsoft feels pretty good about their storefront anyway. And they're going to continue to want to sell things through the Xbox store, in addition to Game Pass. So... I mean, that seems like potentially viable strategy. Like whether it'll work out or not, we don't know. We don't even know if that's the actual strategy yet, right? But they've got to do something, and the traditional model just isn't working for them anymore. And I feel like they need to do a big shift, something to sort of like upset the competitors. Just do something different from what their competitors are doing. And this is like. This seems like about the best possible option for them right now. So I don't know.
Oliver?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a console that's more like a Steam Deck could work pretty well, assuming that things are tailored properly for it, right? So I think the concern about the kind of PC hybrid is a little bit misplaced. It really depends on how it's implemented. I don't think it's necessarily a big issue in and of itself. I think it just depends on how the specific hardware is catered to. In the case of the Steam Deck, it works out pretty well, but I think they could go further for sure. In terms of being able to operate their own storefront, I think it works really well when you get lots of scale. Xbox doesn't have a lot of scale, or at least as much as they would probably like to have. So I'm not sure they necessarily have that choice at the moment. They do have some scale, but they don't really have the scale that they did in the 360 generation to really get a lot of royalties off that. And I'd also say that, like, in terms of what they would do with the console, if it's not a big success, their losses are proportionally smaller. And also we don't know that they'll be taking a loss in the hardware. That's sort of an assumption that's baked into prior console designs, but may not be here depending on how they position it. Obviously, if they're positioning it as like, hey, here's an extra thing that we're doing on top of our game sales business, maybe they aren't pricing it at a loss. Maybe they are pricing it to sell and make a profit and to have its own profit generation outside of a storefront. So I think, yeah, there are a few things in there that I kind of contest, but overall I think it's like a sensible way for them to evolve their strategy, especially if the final outcome of, having a more Windows-like console design is actually a good device that works well out of the box.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, my thoughts on this one. First of all, when we say the next Xbox will be more PC-like, it is basically, I guess, how do we describe this? I just think it's going to offer more PC-like features, including the ability to sideload other stores, right? And the current Xbox could do this if it wanted to. There'd be some slight issues in terms of the split memory pool, but it's perfectly viable, especially on Series X. The concept of having Xbox OS ported to PC, it just again, I mean, I suspect it already has been, and it would just allow for continuity of stuff like saves and whatnot to work more effectively, and to have a more unified platform between consoles and PCs. So yeah, I mean, I guess we just need to see the full strategy about what Microsoft is planning here, because, we're seeing a lot of hints being dropped, carefully placed hints being dropped. When Phil Spencer does an interview, he's questioning the concept of having hardware that's basically sponsored by game sales, revenue from game sales subsidizing the console. He's questioning that because it doesn't seem to be, as a concept, increasing the market in any way. We seem to have the same amount of players. The question is, of course, whether if he goes with a different strategy, whether he'll lose players, which is the danger. Yeah, interesting questions here. But I think fundamentally, there's a lot of things in play here that are going to define this strategy. We could do with more clarity from Xbox, but I can fully understand why they won't do it now, because we're quite some time away from new hardware arriving. I think when we actually see this handheld, which I suspect we'll see sooner rather than later, a lot of things might come into focus about how this split is going to actually manifest, the concept of PC and Xbox persisting on a single piece of hardware.